Dear guests, welcome to the expert meeting of good practices in the development of media literacy in Bulgaria and Germany, which is organized by the Media Literacy Coalition in the framework of our valuable partnership with the Friedrich Naumann Foundation and the Ministry of Culture. I'm Antoneta Vasilieva and a member of the Media Literacy Coalition. I would like to welcome all of you here in the hall and those online for joining us, and also the representatives of the Media Literacy Coalition. I hope that the dialogue we have prepared today among Bulgarian and German experts, the members of the Media Literacy Coalition, the Electronic Media Council will be productive and useful for us. We would like to thank the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for supporting us yet again and encouraging us to conduct the expert meeting and exchange experience. I would like to invite Valchanov, coordinator, project coordinator, on behalf of the Freedom Foundation, Friedrich Naumann, please. Hello, dear guests to the meeting. I'm very pleased with the cooperation of the Media Literacy Coalition. This event will outline the challenges and also the prospects in the development of media literacy, and also raise the debate about the role, the place of institutions and different stakeholders in developing the policies of media literacies. We will like to elaborate on the debate, and we have invited foreign guests who will represent their experience and good practices in the area of media literacy in Germany. The event will be informal, so we would like to encourage you, and we'll be very glad to see your active participation and to respond to your questions, and we hope it will have added value and meet your expectations. I wish you a productive event and active participation. Thank you, Ivailo. As Ivailo already mentioned, the event will have two panels. We will start with the discussion expert panel with representatives from Germany and Bulgaria. Among our special guests today are Jannis Hahn, Isabella Schmid, Dr. Ivan Valchanov, and of course, Prolet Velkova. Last but not least, Iglika Ivanova. After a short break, we will continue with a debate where we will exchange opinion and experience in the area of development of media literacy and all the challenges we meet. We hope that we can have an active and productive dialogue with you here in the hall. Now I will give the floor to Iglika Ivanova, member of the Media Literacy Coalition and the Expert Council for Media Literacy at the Ministry of Culture. Please, Iglika. Thank you, Tony. Thank you all for being here. Special thanks to Jannis Hahn and Mrs. Isabella Schmid for accepting the invitation to participate in our meeting and discussion, so we can exchange good practices and inspire each other. I can assure you from preliminary talks that we will see many similarities and encourage each other that we are heading in the right direction. Starting this panel discussion, I will introduce each of the participants. We will start with Mr. Jannis Hahn, who is an associate researcher in the School Pedagogy unit department of the Würzburg University. He's actively working with professors and lecturers, and he will paint the picture of the importance of qualification of teachers in a broader context related to the German education system and the place of media literacy in it. Please, Jannis.
Yeah, so thank you very much for the invitation. I would like to thank the Media Literacy Coalition, the Friedrich Naumann Stiftung, and also everybody involved in the organization. So for the next minutes, I would like to give you a short glimpse on different perspectives on media education in school and in initial teacher education. So our Chair of School Pedagogy at the University of Würzburg, with our chairholder Silke Grafe, is internationally recognized through the work on educational technology and media education. We have the Media Educational and Educational Technology Lab, which involves also innovative equipment with which we conduct seminars with media-related focuses. I personally am very much interested in conducting, implementing, developing teaching concepts for initial teacher education to educate pre-service teachers with a particular regard to a critical analysis of media and society, about which I will talk a little bit more. So just to give you a short insight into current empirical findings from Germany, because I think it's very interesting to have the perspective from a German side, I just want to give you a very short glimpse on different findings. So, for example, 64% of children aged 6 or 7 in Germany already use the internet multiple times during the week. Also, we have TikTok, WhatsApp, and Instagram as a top 5 in the top 5, besides Google News and normal search engines for news searches from children from 12 to 19. Also, only 20% of adolescents between 12 and 19 state that they have not been in touch with hate speech. And also, a very new study of Elbdoodler states that still socio-political interest is growing for adolescents, and they are interested in growing and moving forward and also conducting processes of change in society. So what we realize is, on the one side, that there is a strong media convergence and a multi-layeredness across the media use, also of very young children. On the other side, the contexts of media use become more diverse, and participation for adolescents plays an important role in an ever-changing and also fast-paced society. So I think we should mention some important points for media education in this time. So I think it is very important to foster multi-perspective thinking and a climate of openness and tolerance among adolescents. And this can be reached through an action-oriented approach, so that we understand the media interest, the media environment of young adolescents, and that we see them as self-determined and acting individuals. This also implements that we focus on a perspective that doesn't see media use as radical, so that it doesn't focus on a digital vulnerabilization or an insufficient sensitization, so that we realize that competencies among adolescents are already there and that they can be fostered in many ways. All in all, I would say it's important to meet the contemporary and the future requirements in educational establishments, so pedagogical measures become very important. Let's have a short look at the media literacy frameworks in German education, first at schools and then on initial teacher education. So the status currently in Germany is that the federal state of law declares education as the responsibility of the states. That means basically cultural sovereignty, so the jurisdiction for cultural issues and purposes is among the federal states, which also means that media literacy implementation differs from federal state to federal state. All in all, the Ministry of State for Culture and Media states media literacy as a key qualification among reading, writing, and also calculating. So they definitely see the importance. And for example, the Bavarian State Institute for School Quality and Education Research implemented a framework for media education, which can then be used for an own school curriculum. That also means that Bavarian curricula and also curricula for schools differ very much, so I still see many potentials for integration. In initial teacher education, where I focus a lot on the implementation of strategies in seminar courses, I don't see a comprehensive and compulsory integration of media education at the moment. So the media-related focus often depends on the orientation of a respective chair. So with our chairholder, Silke Grafe, we have a very good symbol for a future education that focuses also on teaching about media and teaching with media, with many related media focuses. So it is very important that we talk about how pedagogical concepts can be included in initial teacher education to educate the pre-service teachers in order to make media literacy more better in education, in schools, in future education. Before I give you a short glimpse on a best practice example, I just want to show you different short examples of Germany of the last weeks and months, just to ensure the awareness for us how much society, media, education, and also politics are intertwined altogether. So, for example, the conditions of media production are always institutional, political, and socio-cultural. So if you see the left person, Christian Drosten, who is a well-known virologist in Germany who came to prominence through his actions during the COVID pandemic, and on the right side, Karl Lauterbach, who is the health minister of Germany at the moment, they have a very high presence on Twitter, and they raised the debate in Germany in the last 1 and 2 years about how empirical evidence can contribute to public dialogue on social media platforms in which individuals, like from young to old, participate in receiving messages. On the other side, politicians and parties use different design features and different productions of media messages to convey their personal and opinions and standpoints. So we might have different designs that support the Ukrainian people, but also there might be different features in media messages that oppose it, for example, from right-wing parties. On the right side, you can see Kevin Kühnert, who is the General Secretary of the Social Democratic Party. He used to be a very active person on Twitter, and in the last couple of weeks, he received a lot of criticism during his with some statements about supporting the Ukraine with armed forces, and he withdrew his account from Twitter, and that also caused a debate about how public discourse should take place. And also on this slide, you see a self-professed influencer who is what studies say, one of the most influential and interesting persons with reach for young people at the moment. And what is very interesting to see is that she's using marketing techniques and filters and beauty poses to create a personal picture. So while all those people that I showed to you come from different perspectives and from different areas, they have things in common. They have in common that they have a high media presence. They have in common that they actively communicate with their followers, but especially they consciously and unconsciously influence opinions. They make values, morals, and they might also influence young people in a conscious and an unconscious way. So I personally see a critical-oriented media education as very important, that we focus on technical processes of change, for example, that we focus issues such as metaverses, in which brands start to create own digital markets, that we look at content-related processes of change. Information changes a lot in these days. We talk about Ukraine war, we also talk about energy crisis, and also about institutional and economical processes. So the intertwinings between individuals, brands, and also other media concerns. So it is important to engage systematically with these social and economic issues, and to discuss also the consequences for the personal development and also for the plurality of opinions and for a democratic thinking. A short look at a best practice. So our chair's goal is to iteratively develop and evaluate pedagogical concepts for initial teacher education. And I concretized this together with Professor Grafe in fostering pre-service teachers in how to teach about media. So we theoretically and practically recognized different competencies that teachers should have and that they should be able to. For example, they should be able to understand and assess individual or social conditions for media education activities of young people. So they should know about the media interests, about the media environment, and they should know about the influences that that has on the socialization, the education of the adolescents. They should know about theoretical approaches and about the best strategies to foster competencies, and that they should also know about examples that already exist and that they evaluate them from a normative standpoint, how they might be beneficial for their own teaching. In the end, they should be able to develop and implement, but also to evaluate from different aspects own teaching units, and that was what we tried to implement in the last semesters at the University of Würzburg. So with a particular regard to a critical analysis of media and society, we implemented a course which is taking place 4 times in a semester with approximately 14 units and also with 90 minutes per unit. With many competency-oriented tasks to stimulate the pre-service teachers, and what we tried to focus on was that they individually form and develop own teaching units that will help them to raise competencies and also to decide by their own which content might be best for their personal background, as we have teachers from very different school types and subjects. For this slide, I just want to ensure that you see that we very much try to put the competency aspects that I already mentioned together with the tasks of a portfolio which is created over the semester. This portfolio includes this idea of the development of teaching units, and we very much relate this to the content that I teach in these seminars. With everything said, I would like to lead over to the next discussion. I have also put some further notions that might help us for the discussion. I think we should further develop professional guidelines. We should exchange our information more with governments. Also, should the government exchange those information with schools, and media education should be compulsory integrated into universities. But very important are also these events that we have today. So we should learn from each other and have different collaborations in which we exchange information. Thank you.
Thank you, Jannis. Thank you. And now on to the next presentation. You will meet Mrs. Isabella Schmid, who is head of the Media Literacy Project of the Bavarian Public Operator. I would venture to say that her participation is directly linked to an area which we have identified as something that we are yet to develop in Bulgaria. It is in the area in between the media, their products, and the role of the media regulator. So I would like to give the floor to Ms. Isabella Schmid. Please, you have the floor.
Hello, dear colleagues. I'm pleased to present you the media literacy projects from the public broadcasting for Bavaria, Bayerischer Rundfunk. My name is Isabella Schmid. I'm the head of the media literacy projects. And to begin with, I would like to give you a short information about Bayerischer Rundfunk so that you know the environment in which we carry out the projects. So please share the presentation with the first chart. Bayerischer Rundfunk was founded in 1949 as a non-profit public broadcaster and is monitored by a broadcasting council. This council consists of representatives of the major organized groups. For example, political parties, trade unions, churches, youth and family and sport organizations, and so on. A universal household fee financed it, and the rule is simple: one household, one fee. Now it is 18.36 euros per month. On the second chart, you can see that Bayerischer Rundfunk has 10 radio programs and 2 TV programs. We have also 2 orchestras. The Bavarian Radio Symphony Orchestra is among the world's best. Bayerischer Rundfunk has earned a first-rate international reputation for outstanding films and documentaries. Around 5,000 people are working for Bayerischer Rundfunk. Now we can go to the third chart. You know, Germany is a federal state. Every federal state has its own radio and TV programs. And you can, of course, watch every program in Germany. Our mission is defined as information, arts and culture, entertainment, and education, our field. Our department is supporting media literacy, which means students and teachers should become media savvy in the sense of critically handling the media. We have 2 focal points. One is school projects, working with young people, and the other is teacher training, as you can see it on the next chart. We have many school projects. I show you 3 of our big ones. Practical media work is important for all of our projects. We believe media safety is best understood through do-it-yourself. All our participants work together with journalists from Bayerischer Rundfunk. I start with young reporter. You see it on the right side. The idea is we don't go to the young people and make a TV report about them, but they tell their story and we help them to make a good report out of it. It is important for us not only to work with young people from big cities, but also with young people from all over the country. That means from all over Bavaria. The topic of the next round is community and cohesion. All of the reports were broadcast in our TV program. The second school project is Turn On. It's a school radio project. Every year, around 50 school radios take part. They get workshops, how to make radio reports, but also how to do journalists get their news, how do they find out what's true. After the workshops, they continue to work on their radio contributions in the schools. And at the end of the school year, there is a big final event at Bayerischer Rundfunk with an award ceremony. And then our Youth Media Day. We at the Bayerischer Rundfunk had the original idea, and now all the public broadcasts that I showed you take part. We can give to chart 5. Originally, school classes came to our stations to make workshop, see the big studios, and talk to journalists. This was no longer possible due to the pandemic. Therefore, we changed over quickly and planned the Youth Media Day as a virtual event, and it worked very well, better than we thought. This year, we will have around 150 workshops, normally one for 1 or 2 classes, and we will have web talks who run on YouTube, where we have, of course, no limit of participants. On the next charts, you can see our topics, for example, fake news and how it spreads, check facts, how honest are influencers, but also freedom of the press and diversity in media. Our links to foreign correspondents, for example, in Tel Aviv, in Warsaw, and Istanbul, are very well received. The next Youth Media Day will take place on the 15th of November. And now you will see some impressions from our last Youth Media Day, and the film has subtitles. Movie off, please.
Moin, hallo.
Seid ihr startklar?
Ready to go, gleich geht's los.
Hallo ihr alle beim Jugendmedientag.
Ja, schön, dass du dabei bist. Ich erzähle dir ganz kurz, was wir bisher gemacht haben.
Großes Interesse bei den Schülern an Nachrichten. Das hätte ich so gar nicht erwartet.
Herr Burgert, wie ist die Stimmung in DC nach den Wahlen?
Bei anderen Themen gibt es ja schon ganz unterschiedliche Meinungen. Und da ist ja auch unsere Aufgabe, alle zu Wort kommen zu lassen, dass ihr euch dann als Zuschauerinnen, als Zuhörer eure eigene Meinung bilden könnt.
Wir berichten ja aus der ganzen Welt. Also wir gucken wirklich nach Afrika, wir gucken nach Asien, wir gucken überall, was los ist und versuchen dann das Wichtigste des Tages, was uns nah ist, was wichtig ist, herauszufiltern.
Und das ist gerade im Bereich des Wissenschaftsjournalismus total spannend.
Ich finde es schon krass, dass die Studiowelten oder diese Szenerien so eng beieinander liegen.
Ich schicke ganz liebe Grüße zu euch in die WG und schalte jetzt mal wieder nach Hamburg. Das geht hier alles ganz flix.
Was war eigentlich Ihr Traumberuf als Kind?
Ich bin ja so eine Art Quereinsteiger, die es in jedem Beruf gibt.
Ich hätte mir tatsächlich, glaube ich, als Jugendlicher gewünscht, dass es sowas damals schon gegeben hätte.
Das haben früher meine absoluten Heroes moderiert. Wenn die auf dem Schirm erschienen sind, dann da war ich happy und wollte das als kleiner Junge natürlich auch gerne machen. Aber habe mir das natürlich nie träumen lassen, dass das auch irgendwann mal klappt. Die Sportschau ist der heilige Gral der Sportsendung, ist so. Ich bin damit groß geworden.
Mal moderieren oder vor der Kamera stehen und all das, was zu Medienmachen dazugehört.
Wir sind jetzt hier übrigens in Uelzen, verbunden mit der Klasse 11b. So.
Hallo!
So.
Ich bedanke mich hiermit herzlich für das Interview. Es hat sehr viel Spaß gemacht.
Spannende Einblicke in dieser virtuellen Führung in Lansing. Bei daheim ist daheim.
Und jetzt habe ich genug geredet, war sehr toll mit euch. Danke auch an Roland und Irina, dass ihr die ganzen Fragen hier reingehauen habt. Tschüss und danke, dass ihr dabei wart.
So, these have been some impressions. You see the pupils have been mostly in their schools, but we have been in the studios and all over the world and tried to show them a lot from our work. So we can go to the next chart. These are our teacher training courses. Video online workshops for small groups called BR Goes to School, and we offer an intensive 2-year training course to become a media expert. The media experts go through 1-week compact courses, currently in person and online. After 2 years, you will receive a certificate that is recognized by the Ministry of Education. And perhaps what is interesting for you, together with the Goethe Institute, we did this media expert training course for East European German teachers. It was financed by the Goethe Institute, and we from Bayerischer Rundfunk did all the coaching. In July, this year in July, the course was held face-to-face again on the subject of journalism and culture. We went to the museum and the theater with the participants and had many background discussions with directors and actors. A highlight was a visit to the Oberammergau Passion Play. Even if you are not religious, it is a great experience to be there. These teachers made a film together with our coach, and let's have a short look on it. The movie is in German language, and I will explain what's going on, so lower the tone, please, and start the movie, please.
In den Bergen in den Alpen in Süddeutschland, wo
Oberammergau is located in a very beautiful area. You can see it near the mountains, 1.5 hours from Munich. The Oberammergau Passion Play has a 400-year tradition. And the participants made interviews with Christian Stückel, who is the director of the Passion Play. And our group of teachers were able to have a lengthy conversation with him backstage. Here you can see the theater, and this is Christian Stückel, who talks to our teachers. 1,500 people from Oberammergau play in this piece, so practically all of them, children as well as old people. They have watched the play, and afterwards they had a background conversation with Christian Stückel. And they could also talk to the actors of the play, to some of the actors of the play, and I think it was fascinating for them. And Christian Stückel has changed very much in this play. It's every 10 years, only every 10 years. And in former times it has been very traditional, but now it has changed a lot. The one with the red beard, you can see him here on the left side. He is Muslim and he has played Judas. That would have been unthinkable before. 20 years ago it was not possible, but now, today, everyone can play if they live in Oberammergau. That is the condition. And the teachers made the film together with our journalists, and they were very proud of the film, and rightly so. You see, he's a very vivid person, and the whole city of Oberammergau, it has, I think, 5,000 inhabitants, and a lot of them played in the play. And they have to wear birds, you can see it, a year before the play starts. Every man in Oberammergau then became a bird.
Was machen Sie beruflich? Mache ich gerade nichts anderes außer die Passionsspiele. Aber nach den Passionsspielen im September tatsächlich beginne ich dann ein Schauspielstudium. Und Raumfahrttechnik und studiere gerade noch im Master Fahrzeugtechnik. Wirkt es kontrovers, dass ein Muslime Judas darstellt? Also mittlerweile ist es wirklich so, dass jeder das total normal findet und es wird auch gar nicht hinterfragt. Also die sagen einfach nur, gut, dass du das bist, das passt.
Ich bin sein Mörder. Wir fordern seinen Tod! Seinen Tod!
Yeah. That was the film the teachers made by themselves with the help of our journalists. And they had made some other conversations here and talked to directors of theaters, of the museum. And I think they really enjoyed this week in Munich. Yeah, that was my brief overview. Thank you for your attention. And I'm looking forward to questions and suggestions. And if you remember something later, you can see on the last chart my email address, so you can contact me also after this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the very interesting presentation, Mrs. Schmid. We will continue further with a project which will be explained by Dr. Valchanov. Dr. Valchanov, you have the floor to speak about your project of survey of the attitude of secondary school teachers in Bulgaria in teaching media literacy. We had the honor to cooperate in a very productive way with the Department of Media and Communications at the University of National and World Economy in June. A study as to how far media literacy is developed among students, school and university students. You are about to complete the project as a monograph, and we will all be able to use this significant thesis. This will be our first report to the European Commission on the measures taken and the implementation of the media literacy policy in Bulgaria. Thank you. Good morning to all. Thank you for the invitation. Good morning to our foreign guests and all guests in the hall. I will introduce the results in the context of today's topic. These are the results of a study we conducted among Bulgarian teachers. You will see the statistical data in a while. The presentation will be in English, but I will speak in Bulgarian, which I hope will be easier for everybody. Before that, I will say a few words about our project. There is a typo in the title, which I apologize for. Integration of teaching practices in media literacy in Bulgaria. It's a 3-year project from 2019 to 2022. This is a university project. And for the first time, by research and participation in events on media literacy, we conducted a very profound study of media literacy with the prospect of broadening and deepening our research. This is our team. Unfortunately, only I was able to attend. The rest of the colleagues are teaching at the moment. Before I proceed to the results of the study, I wanted to share something outside statistics. It's something that happened only 2 days ago. It was a reality check for me and personal experience. Further down the road, there is a small park which we often attend with my wife and my little son, who is only 2 years old. And there was a nice, kind lady sitting on our bench because the other benches were occupied. She liked him very much. She says, very intelligent, very handsome, but with some reservations. Why was that? Because his future was in question, she said. She said she had the information that over last night, 17 airplanes flew over Sofia, which were spreading something. I was interested, and I wanted to prompt her the answer. I said, some poison? Yes, she said, of course, some poison. What is this conversation continued, but we have no time here for that. What is the moral? Media literacy is a skill. I don't know even how to define it. It's a literacy that it's a lifetime acquisition. And the conclusions we reached, thanks to our study and what we heard from our colleagues with their presentations, is that the earlier we start having media literacy, the better. And the need of media literacy is becoming more and more salient from 2 to 6 years old, from 6 years to finishing high school, and also for university students. Now I will proceed to the results of our study. They were presented at another event. And at the end of the presentation, we will have a more global conclusion. Please keep your fingers crossed, because on the 20th, the project will be completed and hopefully adopted. As Iglika mentioned, the results will be ready soon. A detailed report on everything we managed to find out in media literacy in Bulgaria. On the study, it was conducted at the beginning of this year, online, which is the way we teach students during the pandemic, in Microsoft Forms platform, with the cooperation of the regional Department of Education. We had 534 participants with various experience. The town where the teachers came from. Teaching profession is clear to all of us. We will discuss the measures in another discussion. This is not our topic today. And a broad range of students. But the teachers who filled in the questionnaire were teaching between the 8th and 12th grade. This was our focus. I want to mention another trend among teachers in Bulgaria, namely that almost half the respondents, that is a big part of Bulgarian teachers, have over 20 years experience in teaching, which means that we need fresh talent. We will need fresh talent soon, because there will be shortage soon. With regard to the towns and cities, there was a balance between the capital, regional centers, and less respondents from small towns and villages. The first question, a very important question, is what do teachers understand by media literacy? Because if at the beginning, when this term came about, they understood the correct use of the media, today we can point to numerous definitions, especially of the term media literacy. And if we add digital media literacy, then we have a really broad range. We have critical thinking, of course, understanding the idea of the media, creating media content, understanding media content, cyber violence, hate speech, etc., etc. Therefore, it is important for us to understand what teachers see in media literacy. And the first one is to be able to tell fake media information. Another popular response is understanding the functions of the media, understanding media messages, and integrating an understanding of media content. These were the most popular responses in the questionnaire. Of course, some of the most topical themes also were present. Next slide, please. It says whether teachers made use of the possibilities for training in the area of media literacy. Unfortunately, more than half of the respondents did not make use of that. A big percentage state that they self-train themselves. They find their resources by themselves to draw on examples, to present to the students, and enhance students' media literacy. The next question was, what are the main deficits of state policy for implementing media literacy in Bulgarian schools? This is a question specifically on schools, but it's also good for universities and higher education on the whole. There is no concept. There are some ideas in all the education documents. The term media literacy is present, but there is no comprehensive concept. We suggested curriculum. In the second part of the discussion, I can present the topics we suggested. Of course, they are based on the results of our study. So there are no resources, there is no preparation for this lack. Why is implementing media literacy so difficult in Bulgarian schools? Next question is, what would motivate you to include media literacy topics in your classes? And we have interesting responses given by the respondents in the study. Number one, integrating the topics in the curriculum. This, of course, is a logical response, but almost an equal number of responses is the access to resources. And the main resources we have studied and described stem from the activities of NGOs, which result from events like today and different initiatives, trainings, etc. We have studied and described about 15 guideline books for teachers, etc., which were developed by NGOs and can be used as a valuable source of information and study cases to integrate media literacy in Bulgarian schools, and of course to support Bulgarian teachers, because they claim that they want to integrate these topics in their curriculum in a broad number of subjects, because we did not only ask teachers teaching Bulgarian literature or whatever, but almost throughout the range of subjects taught in the schools. Next question, which key competences do you develop by teaching media literacy topics in your subjects? Number one was information literacy. What we also notice here, that we have open question and answer, and a lot of the teachers speak on the safe use of the media. This is not part of the traditional concept on the media, but it's a very important component for today's children and adolescents, as Jannis mentioned, who spend a huge amount of time in the social chats and social media. And by all means, we are happy that Bulgarian teachers are conscious of that, and they teach their students how to safely use the internet. Naturally, among other common responses were to be able to tell which information is fake, the use of search engines, etc. The presenter asked if he was over time. Do you think schools and universities should join forces in educating teachers and creating teaching resources in the field of media literacy? This is the last question. Of course, they say definitely yes, this is the most common response. And partially is the next. And negative are very few. So teachers understand the potential usefulness of joining forces of all stakeholders in the media literacy area. Now we are nearing our conclusion. What else did we study in the framework of our projects, apart from what I just presented? We conducted interviews with media literacy experts. We had 3 deep interviews. Professor Danov is here. He is one of the respondents. The rest, unfortunately, are not present. They shared their position, their view, and very important guidelines for integrating media literacy in school education. We had a review of the concepts, what I mentioned in the first slide, how the idea of media literacy changes over the years with the development of society and technologies. Next comes Bulgarian and world practices in the field of media literacy. We studied a number of documents which are key, which are basic documents in the literacy area worldwide and in Bulgaria. The difference between formal, non-formal, informal education in media literacy. There is a difference between the 3 types of education, and of course, the sources and the future. For the first time, I would like to publicly announce that we will continue our work in the media literacy field, and the Department of Media and Public Communications now is the final stage of turning it into a UNESCO department. And the topic of this project will be media literacy. This is a main pillar. The other is cultural policies. But number 1 is media literacy. So I do hope that our joint efforts will contribute to a serious studying of this area. What is the moral? It was mentioned a couple of times. There is a need for all of us who do media literacy to unite our efforts because this is the only way to improve media literacy as a whole, starting from school education to lifelong learning. This is from me and our team. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Dr. Valchanov. It was an excellent transition, an excellent bridge, going back to the media. And the role for the media regulator, the Electronic Media Council. Our guest, who is a representative of the regulator, will tell us why in a short while. And before that, we would like to give you the floor to continue from where Mrs. Schmid ended and perhaps to comment on what we heard. Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm really happy to be here because this invitation made me feel quite at home. Why am I saying this? Because a lot of the organizations working on this subject and the people working on this subject were my colleagues while I was working as a journalist in Tarik, and we tried to do something good for our society, for the public. How did we do? Were we successful? This is another issue, but we're talking about something else now. I talked to the organizers, and I was wondering whether the best place for me was to sit here as a member of the panel. I don't feel as competent on this subject as the remaining panelists. It is a very specific topic requiring specific expertise, but I can tell you quite quickly what the commitments of the Council are, what our responsibilities are in accordance with the law, and my dream, my fantasy, my best case scenario of what we can do in the future. I'll start with the boring part, the responsibilities of our Council in accordance with the law on radio and television. The Council is responsible for encouraging medias to work in this area, to participate in forming national policy on media literacy, and in particular this means, in a short-term perspective, that we have to find an answer to the question what media have done so far. These are public media, radio and television, not only the big media. What have they done, and what do they plan to do in the future in order to address the issue of media literacy, both in terms of their audience and their staff? Because we haven't talked about this too much, but I think this is very important. It is important to have media literacy among the professionals who produce media output. You know, the Bulgarian National Television has been for a certain time now organizing a podcast called MEGRA, Media Literacy. It has been aired about 10 times so far, with the participation of very well-known, very prominent journalists working for the said media. It is more theoretical, not so practical as far as I am informed. It is very valuable, of course. The Bulgarian National Radio, on the other hand, has for a while, since COVID actually, has created a fact-finding team. It was created on the occasion of COVID, and they have told us that they plan to extend its scope and enlarge the team to focus on different areas. I spoke with the general director recently and asked him whether they've tried to establish links with other media as well, so that their experience can be shared and not capsulated only to the audience of the Bulgarian National Radio, so it could be rolled out and multiplied to be available to the audience or readers of other media, be it online or in other forum. And now, within the next few months, and now I'm speaking in my official capacity, the Council will get in touch with members of the Media Literacy Coalition, academics, experts working in this field, stakeholders, so that we can all get together, have a working meeting, and come up with a working, I hope, really well-functioning roundtable in November. Oftentimes, when we talk about roundtables and certain events of that type, it doesn't sound very attractive for a number of reasons, but I hope that we can organize things in the best possible way so that we can have specific concrete results, concrete ideas for our future work, and can really create the necessary foundation for our future joint efforts in this field. And I hope that we'll be able to really manage to do quite a lot to cover the very diverse issues related to media literacy. And this has to be done in partnership between the government, the council, academia, NGOs. I may be missing some stakeholders now in this enumeration, but we should all sit down together and work together. We at the Council for Electronic Media believe that we should have a standing discussion forum, and it would be wonderful if you can help us with this, if you can participate on the subject of media literacy in particular, so we can have a standing forum in the framework of which we can exchange ideas, and not just ideas, also very practical steps which can be taken to target different groups such as teachers, students, journalists, the public in general. These are things we can clarify in the future. I'm just brainstorming right now and just giving you some of my ideas for the future. What I really hope can happen, and what I would really want to discuss with you, so you can tell me your opinion. You can tell me whether it's realistic, whether this can really happen, whether it could work. I would really like for us to produce a media visual product. I don't know what type yet. It could be anything, but it should focus on the subject of media literacy and could be used by TV stations, radio stations. It could be reached through the internet, generally speaking. It could be something interactive, an attractive product, which could, should, I think, not be watched passively, but should get people actively involved in the subject. It could take the form of different attractive games. There are many options. There are many things going through my head as possible options. Of course, this is not the time to discuss it, but if you think that it might be a sensible idea, I think we should talk about this in the future. Maybe after the break or at another time in the future. But I think that this would be a good idea in essence, some sort of a media product which could be broadcast on TV, radio, through the internet, and it could focus on the different target groups. Of course, this would be very expensive, both in terms of finance and in terms of human resources. It will not be easy, but I think it's worthwhile. And something else which I want to share with you today before I finish my presentation, it was mentioned by other speakers as well, but I think it is particularly important. I think that if we look at media literacy in the most narrow sense, how to teach ourselves, teachers, students, to operate successfully in the digital media environment, how to choose our information, how to judge the information, this alone would not be enough. I think media literacy is a broader concept, part of the literacy concept in general, not just functional literacy, but education. It has to do with the need to have educated, literate people. And I think our bigger goal should be an in-depth, deep-running reform of our education system. Of course, within just 2 minutes, I cannot go into this subject and talk about what our education consists of currently. But generally speaking, Bulgarian education has to do with adults asking children to learn certain pieces of information. I think this paradigm has to change. I think education has to find the needs to children. It has to respond to their needs. It has to be adapted to their needs. They should not, children should not be forced into the existing paradigm. There should be more freedom, more responsibilities. Of course, this should be age appropriate based on the development of the respective children or adolescents. But this would certainly lead to critical thinking, to the ability to see your own role in the world, your relations with others. So this is where I'm going to stop. I think you understand what I'm talking about. I know it's very ambitious, very challenging, but I think we must aim high. We must aim to achieve the highest goal, to rethink the whole education concept. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation. I think your presentation has been a lot more inspiring than you may have imagined. This has a lot to do, it is very much linked to what we're talking about with the Ministry of Culture, with the next 6th campaign of the Media Literacy Coalition. I'm very happy about this because I feel that civil society organizations are doing a lot more than governmental authorities. And I'm sad to say that even we at the Electronic Media Council are lagging behind. I think we can work well together. I'm very happy that we'll be working with the Council, and you can play your role, maybe even a leading role. We are going to talk about our future plans, about this future roundtable which we can create, but more on that later. First of all, I would like to talk about the situation in which we find ourselves in 2022 and our efforts to improve media literacy in Bulgaria. I'm quite interested in what's happening on a European level, and this is, I do a lot of work in this regard, and this is why I would like to put our local, national media literacy efforts in the general European concept. This is quite important for Bulgaria because we do not have many traditions in this field. And for example, this is why we see that in Germany they have rich traditions in this area. A long time before the relevant directive and its provisions on media literacy to be introduced in national legislation, which you heard during the previous presentations. In spite of the fact that our experience is not so rich, we already have some good results. It could be quite complicated, but I'm going to tell you about two instruments. One of them is, I think, especially important when we talk about media literacy in a broader context. And on a European level, in terms of media literacy, media pluralism, freedom of the press, we already talked about the fact that media literacy definitions are very dynamic. They're changing depending on economic factors, on technological development, because media are an industry, education is an industry. They go hand in hand with social and cultural phenomena, which are very dynamically changing since 2016. Especially on subjects such as media regulation, platform regulation, because these are two different things, although media and social media sometimes sound like similar concepts. But in terms of regulation, things are very different. Anyway, in 2016, many important things happened, and the dialogue on media literacy became quite prominent in connection with the elections in the USA, with Brexit, and many global events showed us very clearly that any delay in terms of developing critical thinking and the ability of the population to find true information and to communicate safely can have very detrimental effects on the general context. This is one of the slides I wanted to share with you. And later I'm going to talk about my view of how we need to act in the future in order to develop this critical thinking. This is just a short overview of that time frame related to the regulation of the audiovisual sector, the audiovisual market, the single digital market on a European level. And in green, you see the most serious steps related to policies introduced in Bulgaria in the field of education, in the field of media policy. For me personally, it was very important to understand and very exciting to understand how the relevant department of the National and World Economy University is going to develop, and the plans for future cooperation with UNESCO. I think they have a lot of experience in this field. Many important publications have been drafted and published, and I think it is very important to take advantage of this rich experience. So these are the topics that I've focused on in my presentation and my slides. And when we talk about stakeholders, because this might sound a bit abstract, we should try to make a list of those stakeholders, to consolidate them, to know them. You can see a presentation of the stakeholders in my presentation, so that we can really consider their respective roles on an individual level and on a general level. We have a peculiar function in this respect because we are placed somewhere between the individual and the collective, but our cooperation with other stakeholders is very important, and we can take it from here. We can aim to inspire different people, including influencers, as Jannis said in his presentation, so we can take advantage of them and they can feel that they're contributing and they're doing something very important. Now, the components of media literacy, you can see that they are growing all the time. I don't think this will surprise anyone. It is important to stress that media literacy is a complex concept of different literacies, including online services, TV, video games, and I would like to focus on this because this is an industry that we should not ignore. It generates a lot of revenue, a lot more than cinema and music put together. And also, as you said, we want to see where children are communicating, where their social life takes place, where they receive information, where they create. And this is more often than not video games. Now we come back to the big UNESCO frame, which includes also human rights, freedom of the media. And I would like to stress that if we focus in one area or another, this is never good. If we're trying to catch up in a certain area, we must be very careful. And another possible risk is if we focus on certain areas to the exclusion of others. Of course, children very often have some sort of an access to news, to media, but this is quite often a passive access. Much earlier, much before they come to this point, they've been inspired by different actors, different protagonists. And this is why the Ukrainian authorities are focusing on cinema and entertainment. I think this is something we should also pay more attention to. This is another representation of how media literacy is it's flowering in different colors, in different shades. It's not realistic to expect that anyone involved in media literacy could be equally competent in all of these different aspects, and this is why we should cooperate. We should involve all stakeholders. We should work together. Very quickly, the slides are in English, so we can be more inclusive. Our colleagues from Germany can read them freely. Very quickly, the institutional level key engines, key stakeholders, education and cultural policies, of course. I have written down some of the more important accents. The fact that civil education is so new and exotic is another example of the fact that another reason for us to believe that we have to make a serious effort from this point onwards to meet all the needs in this field, to have an integrated, deeply integrated media literacy in terms of education, in terms of teaching. On the other hand, I have to say that the Ministry of Education has been supporting our campaigns for several years. So we're not starting from zero. Yes, a lot of work has been done, and a lot of it has so far been done by the non-governmental sector, but the government institutions are appreciative of this, and they're beginning to take this on board. Now I come to the principle that teachers are seen as the ones who give knowledge, who pave the way for any new developments. Now we go to culture. Media, of course, are inherently related because of our dual nature. And for media literacy also has a dual aspect and dual meaning. Media can work on bringing about media literacy through different programs, as we saw in Mrs. Isabella Schmid's presentation, but also in keeping with the journalism standards, with transparency, fact finders in all public media, introducing media literacy as part of the ethos of public media. This will in itself lead to higher criteria, and it will make the respective media much more trustworthy, and it will make them preferred by the audience. So we have an additional incentive for media to produce high quality products and be preferred to the mushroom media. Perhaps we don't have a very good word for this in Bulgarian still. Later we're going to talk about the importance of data and how we measure influence, but we'll talk about this later, how a responsible media will take responsible decisions based on responsible fact-finding. This is just a very short illustration of how the internal market has developed over the years and what is the place of media, including digital and converging media on an European level. I've mentioned here Article 6 of the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Level related to competence of the European level, of the European Union, which is only to support member states. I know this is a little bit confusing when we start quoting specific regulations, but there is, in addition to this, harmonization of the European legislation with the Fundamental Rights Charter. No, maybe this is a face we know, Professor Fab, who is a representative of the ARD public media in Germany. Her picture is here to illustrate the position that media are not just there to provide reliable information, but also to teach people to have a higher degree of media literacy, to be better able to cope with this sea of information. And now just a very quick overview, a zoom in of the time frame which I showed you earlier on in my presentation. So this zoom in is just to show you that in 2017 the Media Literacy Coalition was created in response to a very in-depth study of media literacy on a European level. I would like to encourage all of you to find this research, which was requested by the European Commission. It is a very interesting document, and it shows that Bulgaria does not have an authority, one body, which would be responsible for media literacy. The regulator was not involved at that point in time in promoting media literacy, but we do see a lot of improvement in this area, so let's not just focus on the negative. We started organizing regular media literacy events. A special Media Literacy Expert Council was created under the auspices of the Ministry of Culture, and its role will become more clearly seen when we start working together to enhance media literacy in Bulgaria. And together with all our counterparts from member states, we will have to report on what we have achieved. Of course, this is difficult for organizations when they have to report how well they've done their job, but it is equally a very important task. We have to measure our progress. There are also many other stakeholders we have to involve on an institutional level. There are many people working on e-governance, information and communication technologies. There are some very good results which we see in research, which shows that civil society is quite interested in the subject. Awareness has been raised. I suppose we'll go straight on to the round table, and there we can discuss the topics which you may have identified during the previous speakers' presentations. Of course, the subject is is developing all the time. It's very flexible, which is a good thing on one hand, but it is difficult for stakeholders to cooperate in this flexible environment. And this is why the expert working group on a European level has seen that there is a need for better cooperation. I hope that we can learn from certain shortcomings that we have identified in the past. And I'm going to finish here. There are several more slides which I'm not going to go through. We can look at them later and we can discuss them. They have to do with measuring media literacy, which is in itself is very difficult, because direct media literacy measuring is very difficult. Even there is some discussion whether it is useful at all or not. Can it be measured with standard measurement tools like we measure the literacy or the knowledge of students in school. Here we have to look at the wider media and social aspects, the possibilities for accessing information, analyzing media products, creating media products, developing the skills of the public media pluralism. The European University Institute has produces every year a study in this area, and I think it's worth keeping an eye on. This is an annual monitoring, which I think we should all follow. I think it's very important to look at media literacy as a combination of knowledge and skills which allows citizens from all groups and all ages to be included and to be socially represented. Media literacy is actually part of this pillar, which is made up of different indicators. So when we talk to colleagues from the media, and I'm glad that many of them are present here today, we should keep in mind that media literacy is not something limited only to education and educational measures. It is directly related to the freedom of the media, media pluralism. So let's look at all those things together as part of a whole. And I believe, and my colleagues believe, that by strengthening any and every one of these components, this is addressed by the European Union in draft pieces of legislation in relation inter alia to media pluralism and the protection of the freedom of the media. This will bring about a synergy enhancing each and every one of the other components. Thank you very much for your attention.
We are fine. We are doing well in time. You can take a cup of coffee. Professor Danov, 1 second, let me give you the microphone, because people who are online cannot hear you without a mic. I have always admired your ability to summarize without missing the details. I took the floor to apologize, actually, that I have to be at the thesis defense. I want to thank particularly Mrs. Velkova. She asked whether this should be here, this topic should be here or not. I will undoubtedly want to participate, but with regard to interactive spirit, we have already some of that, exceptionally interactive. Teaching parents media literacy, for instance. Again, I apologize for not being able to participate in the debate. Good luck to all. Thank you, Professor Danov. I would like to add, because we spoke of different groups. Mrs. Velkova, parents are one such group, because apart from being teachers, professionals, a lot of us are also parents, and media literacy starts from early age in the family. I would like to go smoothly to the discussion, and again I want to invite you to pick your cup of coffee in the meantime, but it's important to start with key issues. What, according to you, is the biggest challenge in front of development of media literacy in Bulgaria? Please.
The way we create and consume information has changed significantly in recent years. Today, more than half of the world's population, including over 70% of all youth globally, are online. But how can we make sure that all information is used for public good? To promote dialogue and respect, support SDGs and democracy, and empower lifelong learners, instead of breeding hate speech, disinformation, fake news, and privacy violations. Media and information literacy is designed to combat these challenges and enable people to better benefit from positive opportunities. It gives individuals the skills to interpret and understand information, to think critically and click wisely, both on and offline. UNESCO has launched the second edition of the MIL curriculum for educators and learners. It provides a comprehensive framework for information, media, and digital competencies, so individuals can spot misinformation and engage positively in society. It's not just a framework, but a foundation to live by. To help make sense of ever-changing information-based influences by becoming media and information literate citizens, we are empowered to make the right choices. Learn more about media and information literacy and how it can support citizens to think critically and click wisely, on and offline.
Media and information literacy empowers people to think critically about information and use of digital tools. Media and information literacy helps people to make informed choices about how they participate in peace building, equality, freedom of expression, access to information, and sustainable development goals in general. UNESCO supports and champions media and information literacy initiatives across the globe. We do this through actions such as capacity building for various stakeholders, developing curricula for educators and learners to aid the integration of media and information literacy in all levels of education, assisting governments and institutions to formulate national media and information literacy policies and strategies, training journalists to promote media and information literacy to build trust in media, strengthening international cooperation and raising awareness through the UNESCO Media and Information Literacy Alliance, supporting youth organisations to integrate media and information literacy into their policies and operations, and become peer educators online, offering a suite of online media and information literacy courses, including ones for policymakers, undertaking research with the UNESCO Media and Information Literacy and Intercultural Dialogue University Network, organising the annual Global Media and Information Literacy Week. With this holistic approach and rich resources, we can help foster media and information literacy among people and communities across the globe. Here's how you can get involved in UNESCO's media and information literacy initiatives and make a real difference in society.
We will continue now with the second part of the expert meeting, which will put everybody here on an equal footing in the discussion. We would like to discuss the first 5 presentations this morning, and the questions which are of interest to you for the different stakeholders in the policy of media literacy. How shall we conduct the discussion? Each of you can make a sign that you want to speak, ask a question, comment. I will continue in Bulgarian. Our colleagues Jannis Hahn and Isabella Schmid receive simultaneous interpretation. So the rest of us will stick to Bulgarian. I would like to thank all of you for being here. And I would like to introduce you to the online audience. We are members of the Council for Media Literacy, people who are in the area of education. It is a various group, and as a positive result of the expert meeting already is that we identify and we attract new institutions which have their place in the media literacy field. We will speak about the importance of data, the comparison and the measurement of public attitudes, what you have done among teachers. Of course, always taking into account when these studies are representative. So I would like now to give you the floor to make a comment or ask a question. Yes, Mrs. Bonnever from the Ministry of Culture, chairperson of the Council. My name is Aksenia Bonnever. I'm chairwoman of the Expert Council of Media Literacy. I'm very happy to be here and would like to thank the coalition of Friedrich Naumann Foundation for organizing the meeting. Thank you, our guests from Germany. I'm very impressed by what Madame Schmid showed as a good example on how public media could take part in society. I have said time and again in such meetings that we are all running in the same line, the same lane. There is no competition, there is a community and the idea to reach the same purpose, and this is a good level of media literacy in society. Therefore, I welcome the idea of Mrs. Velkova to work in close cooperation with the Media Literacy Council and all stakeholders who have the mission of the importance of media literacy. I would like to repeat again that this is an open public council. We are ready to support all initiatives related to media literacy. The Ministry of Culture will support any initiative, and we can work together in the same direction. We are open to new members as well. So if you would like to participate and join us, you can look me up, and it is going to happen. Yes, please. Thank you. My name is Kalin Manolov. It will be 40 years since I have worked as a journalist. I'm a practitioner, and a big part of what was said here were very interesting studies, but they are far from media practice in Bulgaria. What is interesting here is to invite some of you in some show to present a study, but nothing more than that. I think this is the big problem, the gap, the big gap between theory and practice with regard to what we call media literacy. And we have an agreement that there is no agreement for a definition, which is part of the problem. Freedom of speech is not a separate speech per se, and media literacy is not a different literacy. There is no freedom of speech if there is no economic and political freedom. There is no media literacy if we don't have literacy in education. And this is one of the big problems that I see in Bulgarian education that we have no citizenship education, or we have only in the 11th and 12th grade, which is already too late. We have already complete personalities, and until the 10th and 11th grade, we don't have public education, citizenship education. And if we have truly the wish to be media literate, but free people in a democratic country, this has to change. And here is the role of the state to make citizenship education part of education in general. What does it mean to have citizenship education? This is to be aware of your rights and to be motivated to defend your rights. Objectively speaking, rights are a function of freedom. And if we do not defend our rights, we are in fact supporting those who restrict freedom and restrict media freedom. What is the bitter truth in Bulgaria media environment is that for many years it has been more a political rather than professional project. The role mostly of the TV channels, but not only as brokers to society, was in fact outdated. And this is what leads to huge consequences, part of which is media illiteracy. And I think that the fashionable fact-checking and fighting disinformation is the consequence and not the cause of the problem. Because when you start saying that, proving that something is not true, something that has been shown many times on different channels, you're already too late. How can we prevent the risk and the threat from such violence over the truth, I would say? Because in a great number of cases, not only that the media environment was outdated, but it was made to be sterile. By that, I understand that people were told that the truth does not really matter, that all points of view were important. This, I believe, is a manipulation of the truth, because we cannot have different points of view which contradict the facts and the truth. So from this perspective, a big part of the media, particularly the national media, are in fact lying, or at least the part of the truth is being mentioned, and the truth to fit the ones who are paying for that. So I think media literacy in Bulgaria should be comprehensive, and a bit of the effort at least should be put by the state. Family environment, religion, and all the factors which provide a value-based attitude is important, because everybody can send a message on the internet, and everybody can propagate their values. And values are what everybody is trying to acquire and keep. This is within the framework of freedom. If we cannot defend our freedom, we cannot be free personalities, we cannot have objective information. So I don't have a recipe for that, but I would like to find a cross-section between the information and the audience, what you have been studying, and how it can become part not only of Bulgarian media, but part of the Bulgarian public. Because the media are not an isolated island, and this is what the state should do, I believe, to find this crossing point with all the resources it has at the disposal, I'm sure that we can draw on examples, on practices. I'm very skeptical. Please apologize. I apologize for that. Well, the platform and the environment to discuss such ideas and to get people together, and SEM, this is the Council for Media Control. Well, but SEM should not regulate everything. I am saying this as a 40-year practice journalist. There is no moral and no values in Bulgarian media because it is not present in Bulgarian politics and society. If somehow it can be implemented in all the possible courses that will be taught, this will help enormously everything else. If you would like to respond. Yes, I think I said I spoke on what can be included, but unfortunately what you said is quite right, and this is the bitter truth. And I also have no solution how we can overcome that, the gap between theory and practice, gap between our good wishes and reality is huge. A while ago, we discussed it with colleagues that the more media we have, the less journalism we have. By journalism, I understand sticking to the facts, the standards, responsible behavior. All this relates to what we call media literacy in the narrower sense of the word. I see two ways, even though they are very difficult to tread. One is public effort, public pressure on the institutions and the state. And on the other hand, the institutions in the state, in the country, who have the will and the competence and the wish to be useful, to do something useful. Here we have in the face of the Ministry of Culture, we have expertise that we can make use of. Please repeat, I didn't get what you're saying. Whoever is speaking is not on the microphone and we cannot hear. But yes, public pressure, citizen pressure should affect the institutions. And how would the media go back to their inherent nature and inherent purpose, not to to reflect a profane reality, but to explain and to reflect objectively the reality in the public interest. This is the most complicated task ahead of us. I will stand up because, and I will try very briefly to comment on what colleagues with longer experience said. I have been for 25 years only in the practice in a daily paper, and at a point in time I was in the Marica newspaper in the town of Plovdiv. A reality overwhelmed me. What my colleague Manolov said, Mr. Manolov said, values were lost in the media. And I decided then to leave the media cuisine, where I was just cutting onion, doing the menial job, and to go into science. So what I'm trying now to do as a researcher in the Library Institute is to pick on one segment of media literacy, the copyright literacy, as part of media literacy. As a result of a study which I conducted, I found out that among the journalists are not interested in their rights at all. They are chasing the news and the number of information pieces they need for the day. They don't care at all about their rights, whatever these rights can be. Therefore, we have this big gap, and if we do not, going back, in any case, we are within that cuisine, but the role of journalists is enormous, and we should also seek their competence and their vision about how we can fill the gap a little bit, at least to start filling the gap in some way. It is excellent that institutions, that research institutions, the state are cooperating, but in the media there are still colleagues who can respond to what we are trying to do, and it is very positive. We can rely on their expertise. If you allow me to make a brief comment, partially related to what you said and the presentation we heard from Madame Schmid and Jannis, we should take into account that we have started working on media literacy in conditions very different from media literacy in Germany. This happens at a point in time when we have important information media crisis in Bulgaria. There are very few media operators and journalists who stick to journalistic standards. We have public media which will confirm and reconfirm and formulate what is their public mission. In this context, there are no long-term criteria in the public about the role of journalists and role of media literacy. Along with what was already mentioned, is that most of the audience can make their own content and distribute it, which gives a much bigger freedom, but also bigger responsibility. And we, in fact, enter into the topic of media literacy under such conditions. And we would like to hear Mrs. Schmid, under what conditions media literacy became part of media policy in Germany and policy of the media regulators, because we rely very much now on a bill from the European Union to help us step on a solid base. This is the directive for media communications. We are very much relying on this law. In the German legislation, this directive has been introduced a long time ago, and traditions have been built. What have you accumulated over this period? This would be my question to Mrs. Schmid. And my question to Jannis Hahn would be about the trend that we see here. Public figures and politicians would like to jump the media. They have their own channels in Twitter, which is still not that popular. Facebook is really dominating. 99% of consumers, of clients, rely on Facebook. How, through media literacy, on the one hand, do you educate a need in the public to demand from their public figures to stick to the same standards when they're using their own channels as they would use the media channels, and not to jump the medias, to respect journalists. And on the other hand, whether these public figures who have a dual role to be influencers, opinion leaders, when they make popular their platforms and they attract followers, how do they should they be aware that there is some kind of public control on them, on the use of these instruments? These are the questions, please, Emil. I'm Emil Georgiev.
I'm Emmanuel Georgiev from the Center for Safe Internet. A lot of issues were raised by the different participants, and it will actually be difficult for me to comment on all these multifaceted issues that were raised, but I'm going to talk about something which to me seems to be a clear priority, and this is something good. Over the last few years, we were able to create the Media Literacy Coalition, and the institutions, including the Electronic Media Council, the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Culture, have gotten on board. And the other stakeholders are also being involved, such as representatives of the media, universities. This is good. This is a positive development. We have already some very good practices here in Bulgaria. Just a few good words. It was previously mentioned that especially the civil sector organizations, as Mr. Valchanov said, NGOs such as the one I work for and also the Media Literacy Coalition have done a lot to train young people, students, teachers. Teachers, as was previously said, want to be trained, but there is not enough such training, so they have to be very active in seeking this kind of training in order to attend it. So I think what we need is to have focus, because we already do have a union of the stakeholders. We have got together. Of course, there may be different proposals how to go about this. We have proposed this for a number of years, and I'm going to say this again. I think what we have to do is to make sure that in the field of education, there should be specific efforts to educate students, to bring forward media literacy. We specifically address digital media literacy, to develop basic competences. This is an umbrella term for knowledge, skills, focusing especially on skills, the basic competences that go into the European Digital Literacy Framework, DIGCOM. Having said this in parenthesis, we would like to extend this to cover media literacy in general, not just digital media literacy. It's very difficult to delineate between the two, because they are so closely interlinked, but we have competences in 5 main areas: information literacy, the ability to select information, critical thinking, cooperation, problem solving, and online safety. So we need to develop competences in these 5 main areas, but I think what we're missing now, in spite of the good practices which I already mentioned, and which are somewhat limited in terms of their implementation, we have to admit, although we are doing our best, we cannot achieve such wide coverage of, as we would wish, of all the target groups. It was already mentioned, we work on a project-based principle, so we have limited resources in terms of time, because we mostly rely on projects. But what we really need in terms of our education system in Bulgaria is to integrate media literacy in a holistic way, using a holistic approach. These competences and skills should be developed in all the different subjects. We have worked together with Iglika. We delivered some training for teachers, and it was focused on digital skills during the distance learning period, and we had different teachers, including a physical education teacher who managed to do this very successfully. He asked his students to find information about famous sports teams and athletes. So we should not do things on a piecemeal basis. media literacy should not be limited to the so-called civil education, which is, of course, a core subject which should target this area. But media literacy should be included in every single aspect of the education and every single element. This is something we've been trying to put across and to convince institutions for a while now. And if this happens, we'll have larger coverage and we'll have better focus of our efforts. And this means our efforts will not be piecemealed, we will not have good practices here and good practices there. Of course, good practices will always exist, but it's important to have a focus, it's important to have streamlining of everything that is currently being done, and this includes, this is actually reaffirmed by what I hear from other countries, Germany including, and their best practices. And just one more thing before I conclude. I think the context in Bulgaria and Germany is quite different, but we also have a lot in common, and this mostly relates to internet and the way in which internet is beginning to take over the media space, media environment, its integration, fake news and disinformation, social engineering, which are a universal problem, pan-European problem indeed. People everywhere are trying to deal with this problem, to solve it. And, you know, currently there's a big debate on whether this should be done through some form of regulation, but there is a counter-argument stating that this would adversely affect the freedom of the media and freedom of education. I think this should be best addressed through educating not only young people, but also adults, not only children, but also grown-ups, because I think this is the best thing we can rely on. If we over-regulate, this could lead to censure on the part of whoever the regulator is. I'm speaking in general terms, I'm not talking about any institution in particular. So I think the best way, although it is a more difficult and more time-consuming road, but I think the best way forward is to educate people, to train them, to teach them how to handle information and how to interact, because now they're free to interact. This was it from me. Thank you. Thank you. My name is Milena Dobreva, and I work in the Gate Institute of the Sofia University. I come from a place that has a slightly different context. Gate is a technological institute, and last year we created a special research group on disinformation, which is mainly responsible for identifying cases of disinformation, and a lot of companies are involved in this field, but they work with different languages. Because our market is limited, it is more difficult for us to get them to help us. So we're mostly focused on developing practical tools that would help different professions, because journalists have different needs to, for example, teachers or medics. Young people have a completely different set of needs. So everybody has their specific problems and their specific needs. Maybe they don't even realize this, but they do. And I'm very happy that you mentioned several things. On one hand, this is the importance for the education system to provide a good, viable solution, not in terms of introducing one subject dealing with this matter, but in a horizontal approach which would allow for these subjects to be integrated in the curriculum of the different subjects. This would mean that many teachers would have to be trained what to do, and I'm very happy that you introduced the term information literacy, because when we talk about media literacy, we know that there are different literacies, there are many different definitions, they're quite complicated, complex, there is some flexibility, there are some gray areas, But we seem to approach this area in a more practical way. We're not trying to give definitions that should be widely accepted. What we're instead trying to do is to find some areas in which people can be given specific skills. For example, fact-checking, this is something quite clearly defined. There are different approaches, and people can choose between those and decide what kind of education or training they need. We've done training for journalists, for library staff, focusing on the specifics of the given profession. And I think it would be very useful to see what kind of different areas we should target, what kind of groups we should address, and in what way the education system could be further developed. I'll give you a specific example from last year. I was responsible for coordinating a piece of research which was tasked by UNESCO, and it concerned the education system of Qatar. It's very complex. There are different types of schools with different curricula, so it's very difficult to analyze. But in actual fact, and I've told many of you this at a different meeting, but I want to share it today as well. What was the most interesting thing for me? It was that when we look at different skills and see how they are represented in different curricula, we come to a pyramid which is upside down. There are many different ways in which information is presented. It's visualized through posters, through different ways. The ability, however, to check whether this information is reliable is practically non-existent. So when we come to the point where we're going to introduce these new components in our education, we would be very happy, I would be very happy if this issue is addressed, because otherwise we come to a point where people can present information very well, but they've never even asked themselves whether the sources they use, if indeed they've used sources at all, if these sources are reliable, trustworthy, if they can be trusted. I hope I haven't bored you, and if I haven't, I can tell you something interesting from the training of library staff. We organize such trainings in Plovdiv and in the Pazajic region. They've asked us to deliver some more training on the subject, especially in Plovdiv. But we found that the participants didn't even realize that fact checkers exist in Bulgaria in particular. I had to tell people why we want to train library staff, and it is because people go to them with questions quite often. So when you go to such a training, you realize many interesting things. Sometimes people go to them and ask them which vaccine I should choose. People sometimes don't trust doctors. They think doctors represent one company in favor of another. And people go to the librarian to ask them such questions and get reliable information because they don't have vested interests. And we always try to organize the training so as to, on one hand, help to develop skills and knowledge and help people to use all this in their daily work. But we also try to ask them to think what kind of trainings they would like to organize, because the so-called instructive trainings would not be as successful. Why? Why am I talking about these trainings? Because we get a lot of interesting examples which show us what's happening in our society. For example, when we were talking about the different topics of trainings that we could organize to help those people who go to the library and ask questions, we got answers including the supplements which people take when they are actively working out. Also the food supplements which older people use with the advancement of age. Another thing people often wanted to know was the reliability of information about when they're applying for works abroad. Of course, a lot of information on this can be found online, but people who work in libraries realize that people actually need reliable information on these topics. There were some other topics such as myths and legends from the respective area, how people wanted to know how they can learn what part of a story is a myth or a legend, or what is based on historical events. And there was also another proposal related to the possibility to work with teenagers. There was an idea to organize a course to train young people to make memes. And this could be used to tell young people, to teach them knowledge and skills about what we do, how our actions affect other people, how we need to follow some ethical standards when we find ourselves in the digital environment. Thank you. This was very interesting, very informative, and this is why, indeed, we use the umbrella terms, media literacy and information literacy. And we have a little private joke related to definitions and terminology. I hope it has already become clear that media and the media environment are in a state of convergence. This has been true for many years now, so we find ourselves in the post-digital area. There is no need to treat media literacy and digital media literacy as different concepts. They have long since converged. Now, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Schmid to comment or to answer some of the questions.
Foundation Global Libraries in Bulgaria. Thank you for the invitation. What I understand, thanks to the statements of those who spoke before me, is that there is no coordination. Thank you for the Media Literacy Foundation, that they are trying to introduce this coordination with the help of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation. Yes, but we have been partnering for a few years, and what Milena Dobreva just shared, it turns out that I have been training librarians in media literacy, but when we have 3,000 people, you cannot cover everybody. Each of the NGOs have their focus where they are working. They have the expertise. And over the past few years, different programs accumulated significant resources for the different kinds of users as to the methods they use to improve on media literacy. What Mrs. Velkova pointed out is that until recently, the media were a little bit on the side. We watched them, we monitored them, and we said, this is so, this is not so. They have the responsibility for content creation, and what you said that the media now is a very broad term, because everything is media, space is media, and it is processed in a different way, so there should be no such division now. But it is more difficult to develop media literacy in this environment when everybody is creating and spreading content. And they think that their opinion is the only correct and authentic opinion. And how do we form different categories of users, and how do they evaluate information? So let us work in this direction. And from the Ministry of Culture, the Council for Media Literacy, we need a broader coalition with the active participation of the citizen sector. So each organization with experience over the years can contribute to the faster overcome the low level of media literacy of Bulgarian citizens, because we are not here, we don't mean only children, we're talking about the whole public. For instance, many adults, the first thing they read on the internet, they take it for absolute truth, and they don't put it to the doubt. So we have many, many examples, and I hope with joint efforts we can deal with the issue. Yes, this is the formula. We all agree, I believe, that we are working for joint efforts. Mrs. Schmid, could you please join us again with perhaps response to the question is what has been accumulated in Germany, since you started a lot earlier in the area of media literacy than us, and in maybe more favorable conditions. Or perhaps you will correct me and you will say that when you started the media literacy projects through the public media, you had different challenges that you had to overcome. And then I would give the floor to Mr. Hahn to also comment on how public figures use the social media channels, in what way, and who is keeping them responsible, on how they stick to good journalistic practice when they go around about the media. And through media literacy education, how do you educate criteria and also young, demanding citizens about the messages sent by politicians in particular through the social channels? Please, Mrs. Schmid.
Yeah, thank you. Problems with disinformation campaigns become more and more virulent, especially during the pandemic and the war in the Ukraine. People get so much information, so much news, but they cannot really judge it. They don't know where do the news come from, what is behind it, what was the aim, and what is the intention. Sometimes teachers ask us, what can we do to prevent young people to go to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok? And we have to say nothing. They are there already. Yeah? We have to show them what's behind this, what could be the aim, and how can we check and how can we teach to check the facts. In Germany, it's a mission of public broadcasters to engage in education, not only in media literacy, but also in media literacy. And there was a big survey from the ARD, the network of public broadcasters I showed you before. And the result was our audience expect that we engage in media literacy. And the demand has grown steadily. I think it's not only a duty of universities, of schools and so on, but it's also a mission for the media. Actually, we have reached 20,000 pupils with our media projects in the last school year. That's a good number, it is rising, but I think there's a lot to do also in Germany. And we started with the media project some years ago, and I really see that more and more teachers come to us and tell us, and they do more of this because it is so important in the schools, and we want to teach the young people how they can be safe in media and in the internet.
Question, but also I would like to point out the very important interconnection between the work that can be done by journalism and by people working in journalism areas and by education. So I think we agree that there are definitely commonalities. So public discourse definitely has changed in both countries, in Bulgaria and also in Germany. It is part of social media that less gatekeeping is present, and this makes communication between people on the one side easier, but also makes it harder to follow discussions and to make information reliable from the very first instance. So if we, for example, talk about politicians, it's important to see that, for example, here in Bulgaria, Facebook is still used as a communal practice, if I understood that correctly. In Germany, trends are going via Twitter, but also to TikTok and Instagram. Interesting here is that politicians and parties are also trying to use design features, techniques, trends that attached to young people's interests and needs, which on the one side makes it more accessible to the young generation, but on the other side still shows that it's there's still a long way to go because content is still lacking. So political discourse on social media by politicians and parties is at the moment very much about trying to get the new generation interested via using their techniques. What we realize in Twitter, for example, is that information can be conveyed in a second. And that's what I also tried to express when I talked about, for example, Mr. Lauterbach, who is minister. And before he got minister 1.5 years ago, he was actually also only a person who was who was working in the Social Democratic Party, but he was somebody who already informed people very much about everything he did, and that attached many people to him. And when he got health minister, very many people supported him for becoming into this position. So this can show that the information, or the informing of the public can work via Twitter. But on the other side, we also realize that politicians are having a hard time, especially if there are crises and if they have to speak about it now also on different platforms. But what I would like to point now to is that we can use these new changes in discourse, because on the one side we can also see it as problematic that media becomes even more convergent, but on the other side we have new educators in the next years and next decades who already are attached to all these new forms of media. And since they are attached to these forms of media, they will be a generation of educators that definitely that we definitely need to involve in this new public discourse. And for that, I strongly agree with what was said before by different participants here, that we need to put together content in every subject of schools, because if we try to focus on the one side the content, which is important for the subjects, but if we then also put them together with the content which is found on media, we can find a very good interconnection between fostering media literacy and fostering content to young people as well. So I think what is still a long way to go is that it's still very hard to find a way of dealing with all the information on the internet, but I strongly support the idea of trying to critically analyze it together with young people, be it new educators, new teachers, and also the students in schools, to make it a movement that realizes that discourse is changing. So I think that is very important, that we try to always think content together with fostering different abilities, because that's the only way to find the information together with media literacy.
to comment, we can do that in both directions at any time. We are not separated, of course. The idea is to discuss, to speak among ourselves. It's difficult after so many statements to talk, to speak, and because new topics were suggested. But I would like to share a few thoughts in a sequence. I regret to hear what our colleagues, the long-term journalists, are not here in the room now. How can we improve media freedom and the quality of media products that we receive? Our conviction, I mean, colleagues from the university, is we believe this will happen through education of future journalists. And numerous factors that Bulgarian media people have to take into consideration are political factors, the aim for profit, which have nothing to do with the content, but the commercial media are also business companies in the long run. And this is the place of professional and ethical standards. What should we focus on? Which of the three influences? Yes, the gap between theory and practice is a fact. What we teach our students is something they don't find in their practice and then in their work. Where is the error here, in theory or in practice? The answer is clear. It comes in every study for freedom of speech and what Iglika said, the threat of social exclusion, the level of media literacy, etc. Why we believe education is the key? Because even if our students go to work in media and they tell them, as they often do, forget everything you have studied, we will teach you how to do journalism. And as a result of that, this is what we hear and read in Bulgarian media nowadays. These people, however, have seen the other point of view, the one which we provide for them. The risk, I believe, is that in many Bulgarian media, there are people who are there by accident. They have never heard the other point of view, the theoretical point. So we, on our part, believe that education is the key. Now, on media literacy in particular, we believe that children at the earliest age should be trained, and adults as well, on how to receive information. This is not complicated. We have two factors. First, critical thinking. The idea that everything we read and see is not truth and has to be put in question. So education, experience, environment are factors that influence the perception of a person, the common sense of a person. It's a comprehensive phenomenon, and the common sense of every individual is different. But at least if we could outline the main elements. The fake news can be revealed not by the skills of fact checkers, but a simple check in Google. The point is to get to the conclusion that we need to read more, to critically assess the information, and to look for additional information.
Yes, checking information must be made into an instinct for people, for children. Like we have the instinct to look both ways when we cross the street, we must have the same instinct to check information. I've been listening very carefully to everything you've said. I have been involved in media literacy issues over the last 3 to 4 years, not as extensively as all of you have, but I do work with Emmanuel as part of a larger team dealing with issues related to media literacy among students and teachers, and we see that there is not enough media literacy. And we see in terms of theory that we're not able to translate into an understandable language the things which are important for us. I very often see that when I talk to parents, I'm trying to do my best and I'm trying to explain how important it is to develop media literacy and what stands behind it. But I realize sometimes that when I speak, I do it at a very high professional level and it's not easy for them to understand. And maybe we can see this in the fact that this room is not filled with people as much as we probably hoped it would be. So I would like to ask you, how do you think we can better make children understand the importance of this issue without overburdening them with too much theory? How can we make this speedy, fast connection between theory and practice? Yes, we already got many answers during the interventions in relation to content, interactive content, video games where children are very active, very much involved. Not only children, of course, but everybody who plays games. There was a study ordered by the European Commission several years ago. And according to this research, the average game player was a woman aged 43. Of course, this is not entirely reliable because this involves also the everyday simple little games. So these are not typical gamers, as we call them, who are integrated in their communities. But I think this goes in some way, in part at least, towards answering the question. We have, however, seen that we have a lot in common in terms of problems we've identified, possible solutions, both in Germany and Bulgaria. And yes, we sadly don't have representatives of teen media and teen station, but we do have members who are responsible for talking to young people, to students. I would like to tell you about them, even though they're not here today, in response to what Ms. Schmid said also, because it's very important to involve young people, because some of them are on the road to becoming journalists. Those of them who are a little bit older now, growing out of their teenage years. Yes, but also in respect of what she said about the discrepancy between theory and practice, what we see in terms of training journalists and what they need. I think we'd have a lot better results and a lot more sustainability in terms of professional training and moral values. It will be easier for people to stick to values and best practices and to bear the responsibility. And this will be much easier, and it's much more likely to happen if they've received training in school at a very early age, if they've been taught how to create media products, media content, to create online simulations, to create games, to create different pieces of information, including disinformation even. They can enter different roles. They can create information, disinformation. They could be the people asked to decipher or identify it. I think Emma would like to comment. Just a very quick comment as regards to what Dr. Valchanov started to say, what you called an instinct. We can see very clearly the need to have knowledge, information, and skills, and they have to go together. For example, when you have communication on the internet and somebody tells you something and somebody is pretending to be someone else, now we have to have this instinct. It has to be our second nature. But in order for this to happen, we need a lot of time, and it has to be developed over time, and this development has to start as early as possible so that it would really become a habit, a second nature, so to speak. Knowledge is knowing that you can check the information or knowing certain facts. This is not difficult, but the skill is to practice doing this. And this takes time. It can't happen in an hour. It can't happen so quickly, because we all know that we can check information in Google, but not many people know how to do this properly. Not many people have the skills. Normally people go with first hits. Very often they're not relevant. This is a skill, and this is a skill that needs to be developed over time. It can't happen overnight. And this is why we talk about developing these skills in a systematic way from a very early age, including having the motivation to do things properly, to be critical, including knowledge and including skills. In answer to Tony's question, yes, there are a number of best practices, both in Germany and here. There are a number of practical things that can be done in the form of game playing. The interactive ways, as Iglika said, they give the trainee an active role to play, and not, as someone said, just as people who sit there passively listening to information which is being delivered. This is a much better way to do things, but it won't happen overnight by just explaining one thing to someone once. They have to be given a longer period of time. They have to be given, students have to be given an opportunity to try things out, to make their own mistakes, which is something sadly not tolerated by our education system, but this is actually very important, to try things out, to make your mistakes. It's like riding a bike. You have to fall off a few times in order to learn.
Yes, I would just like to add something. I think if we talk about an instinct that remembers me, that we had it about a little bit about the measurement also of competencies and the question if it is measurable, if it should be measured. But what I think of a lot is that if we are talking about competencies, we can see it as a bundle of personal resources, you could say, and it implements knowledge, but it also involves self-efficacy and beliefs and the motivation. And either if we are talking about persons that are educated in how to teach about it, or if we are talking about children, I think this instinct that we are talking about is not only knowledge, it goes together with self-efficacy, with beliefs, and we can foster students and young children in it. And the earlier, the better, I would say. So I think that would be a note that was important to me.
I think this is actually a very good conclusion, but okay, we're going. What is that? Storkov, journalist in Nova Television. In order to have the right instincts to cross the road, you need to be shown, and people do this. People show their children very early on how to look left and right when they cross the street, but nobody is telling them what to do on Google. They need to be shown this as well, and this has to be done at a very early age, because as everybody says, this is very important. We all realize this is important, but we have to go and convince the parents, because they are the ones at home. They are the ones who can show their children. And also teachers should be addressed. I personally have experienced some very strange cases. I personally interviewed a teacher who claims that man has never been to the moon, or that space travel doesn't exist, and these things really do need to be addressed comprehensively, because none of us alone can solve these problems. And we see from Germany's experience how things can be done smartly and interactively and in a way which is interesting for the children, and therefore they can give us good results. So we'll be very happy if the Council for Electronic Media can get us all together to continue working on this issue. Yes, thank you. And I would like to ask all of you who are here today. We are very diverse, very different. We ourselves do not see our audience. So for those of you who are here and those of you who are going to watch this online, I would really like to ask you, please get involved, participate with questions, with comments, get in touch with us. This is only the beginning of our discussion. And I think, and I hope all of you will agree, that we have grounds to be optimistic. And I certainly, sincerely hope that our future interaction with our colleagues from Würzburg and Bavaria concerning the different stakeholders will also continue in the future. So I would like to once again thank all of you for being here today and for discussing media literacy topics. And I hope to see you again.